The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Jnana Yoga, Chapter 4, Maya and the Evolution of the Conception of God, Part 1. We have seen how the idea of Maya, which forms as it were one of the basic doctrines of the Advaita Vedanta, is in its germs found even in the Samhitas, and that in reality all the ideas which are developed in the Upanishads are to be found already in the Samhitas in some form or the other. Most of you are by this time familiar with the idea of Maya and know that it is sometimes erroneously explained as illusion. The translation of the word is neither happy nor correct. Maya is not a theory, it is simply a statement of facts about the universe as it exists. And to understand Maya, we must go back to the Samhitas and begin with the conception in the germ. We have seen how the ideas of the Devas came to being. At the same time, we know that these Devas were at first only powerful beings, nothing more. Most of you are horrified when reading the old scriptures, whether of the Greeks, the Hebrews, the Persians, or others, to find that the ancient gods sometimes did things which to us are very repugnant. But when we read these books, we entirely forget that we are persons of the 19th century, and these gods were beings existing thousands of years ago. We also forget that the people who worshipped these gods found nothing incongruous in their characters, found nothing to frighten them, because they were very much like themselves. I may also remark that there is one great lesson we have to learn throughout our lives. In judging others, we always judge them by our own ideals. That is not as it should be. Everyone must be judged according to his own ideal and not by that of anyone else. In our dealings with our fellow beings, we constantly labor under this mistake, and I am of the opinion that the vast majority of our quarrels with one another simply arise from this one cause, that we are always trying to judge others' gods by our own, others' ideals by our ideals, and others' motives by our motives. Under certain circumstances, I might do a certain thing, and when I see a person taking the same course, I think he is also having the same motive accentuating him, little dreaming that although the effect may be the same, yet many other causes may produce the same thing. He may have performed the action with quite a different motive from that which impelled me to do it. So, in judging of with quite a different motive, in judging of those ancient religions, we must not take the standpoint to what we incline, but we must put ourselves in the position of thought and life of those early times. The idea of the cruel and ruthless Jehovah in the Old Testament has frightened many. But why? What right have they to assume that the Jehovah of the ancient Jews must represent the conventional idea of the God of the present day? And at the same time, we must not forget that there will come men after us who will laugh at our ideas of religion and God in the same way that we laugh at those of the ancients. Yet, through all these various conceptions run the golden thread of unity, and it is the purpose of the Vedanta to discover this thread. I am the thread that runs through all the various ideas, each one of which is like a pearl, says Lord Krishna, and it is the duty of Vedanta to establish this connecting thread. However incongruous or disgusting may seem these ideas when judged according to the conceptions of today, these ideas, in the setting of past times, were harmonious and not more hideous than our present ideas. It is only when we try to take them out of their settings and apply them to our present circumstances that the hideousness becomes obvious. For the old surroundings are dead and gone, just as the ancient Jew has developed into the keen, modern, sharp Jew, and the ancient Aryan into the intellectual Hindu. Similarly, Jehovah has grown, and Devas have grown too. The great mistake is in recognizing the evolution of the worshippers, while we do not acknowledge the evolution of the worshipped. He is not credited with the advance that his devotees have made. That is to say, you and I, representing ideas, have grown. These gods also, as representing ideas, have grown. This may seem somewhat curious to you, that God can grow. He cannot. He is unchangeable. In the same sense, the real man never grows. But man's ideas of God are constantly changing and expanding. We shall see later on how the real man behind each one of these human manifestations is immovable, unchangeable, pure, and always perfect. And in the same way, the idea that we form of God is a mere manifestation, our own creation. Behind that is a real God who never changes, the ever pure, the immutable. But the manifestation is always changing, revealing the reality behind more and more. When it reveals more of the fact behind, it is called progression. When it hides more of the fact behind, it is called retrogression. Thus, as we grow, so the gods grow too. From the ordinary point of view, just as we reveal ourselves as we evolve, so also the gods reveal themselves. We shall now be in a position to understand the theory of Maya. In all the regions of the world, the one question they propose to discuss is this: why is there disharmony in the universe? Why is there evil in the universe? We do not find this question in the very inception of primitive religious ideas, because the world did not appear incongruous to the primitive man. Circumstances were not inharmonious for him. There was no dash of opinions to him. There was no antagonism of good and evil. There was merely a feeling in his own heart of something which said yea and something that said nay. The primitive man was a man of impulse. He did what occurred to him and tried to bring out through his muscles whatever thought came into his mind, and he never stopped to judge and seldom tried to check his impulses. So with the gods, they were also creatures of impulse. Indra comes and shatters the forces of the demons. Jehovah is pleased with one person and displeased with another. For what reason? No one knows, or no one asks. The habit of inquiry had not then arisen, and whatever he did was regarded as right. There was no idea of good or evil. The Devas did many wicked things in our sense of the word. Again and again, Indra and the other gods committed very wicked deeds. But to the worshippers of Indra, the ideas of wickedness and evil did not occur, so they did not question them. With the advance of ethical ideas came the fight. There arose a certain sense in man, called in different languages and nations by different names. Call it the voice of God, or the result of past education, or whatever else you like. But the effect was that it had a checking power upon the natural impulses of man. There is one impulse in our minds which says do. Behind it rises another voice which says do not. There is one set of ideas in our mind which is always struggling to get outside through the channels of the senses, and behind that, although it may be thin and weak, there is an infinitely small voice which says do not go outside. The two beautiful Sanskrit words for this phenomena are called pravritti and nivritti, circling forward and circling inward. It is the circling forward which usually governs our actions. Religion begins with this circling inward. Religion begins with this do not. Spirituality begins with this do not. When the do not is not there, religion has not begun. And this do not came, causing man's ideas to grow, despite the fighting gods which they had worshipped. A little love awoke in the hearts of mankind. It was very small indeed. And even now it is not much greater. It was at first confined to a tribe embracing perhaps members of the same tribe. These gods loved their tribes, and each god was a tribal god, the protector of that tribe. At the same time, the members of a tribe would think of themselves as descendants of their god, just as the clans in different nations think that they are common descendants of the man who was the founder of their clan. There were in ancient times, and are even now, some people who claim to be descendants not only of these tribal gods, but also of the sun and the moon. You read in the ancient Sanskrit books of the great heroic emperors of the solar and lunar dynasties. They were first worshippers of the sun and the moon, and gradually came forth to think of themselves as descendants of the god of the sun, of the moon, and so forth. So when these tribal ideas began to grow, there came a little love, some slight idea of duty towards each other, a little social organization. Then naturally the idea came, how can we live together without bearing and forbearing? How can one man live with another without having some time or another to check his impulses, to restrain himself, to forbear from doing things which his mind would prompt him to do? It is impossible. Thus comes the idea of restraint. The whole social fabric is based upon that idea of restraint. And we all know that the man or woman who has learned the great lesson of bearing and forbearing leads the most miserable life. Now, when these ideas of religion came, a glimpse of something higher, more ethical, dawned upon the intellectual of mankind. The old gods were found to be incongruous. Whose boisterous, fighting, drinking, beef-eating gods of the ancients, whose delight was in the smell of burning flesh and libations of strong liquor, Sometimes Indra drank so much that he fell on the ground and talked unintelligibly. These gods could no longer be tolerated. The notion had arisen of inquiring into motives, and the gods had to come in for their share of inquiry. Reasons for such and such actions were demanded and the reasons for wanting. Therefore, man gave up these gods, or rather, they developed higher ideas concerning them. They took a survey, as it were, of all the actions and qualities of the gods and discarded those which they could not harmonize, and kept those which they could understand, and combined them, labeling them with one name, Deva. Deva, the god of gods. The god to be worshipped was no more a simple symbol of power. Something more was required than that. He was an ethical god. He loved mankind and did good to mankind. But the idea of God still remained. They increased his ethical significance and also increased his power. He became the most ethical being in the universe as well as almost almighty.